She lived in a small apartment with her mother, in a part of the city where the streets were always busy and the air often smelled of cooking and dust. Her mother worked as a cleaner in a large office building. Every morning, long before the sun rose, she would leave for work, carrying a small bag with lunch and a thermos of tea. She came back tired, but she always made sure the apartment was tidy and that her daughter had something to eat. Even though they didn't have much, the mother's love was the one constant in their lives. The daughter, who was only 12, spent her days helping her mother with chores. She swept the floors, washed dishes, and sometimes ran errands to the small corner shop nearby. She had no friends in the neighborhood who shared her interests. Most of the other children played in the streets, shouting and chasing each other, while she preferred quiet corners, where she could sit and listen to the faint sounds of music drifting from open windows. She loved music more than anything else. It felt like magic, a world where she could escape for a little while, away from the noise and the mess of everyday life. There was an old piano in their apartment. It wasn't in great shape. Some keys stuck, some made strange sounds, and it had scratches on its wooden surface. It had belonged to a previous tenant, and most people would have thrown it away. But for her, it was a treasure. She would sit on the small, creaky bench for hours, pressing the keys softly at first, just listening. Slowly, she started to understand how to make the piano speak, even with its imperfections. She didn't have lessons. There were no teachers to guide her, no books or tutors. All she had was her ear, her curiosity, and her determination. She spent hours listening to recordings of famous musicians on an old, worn-out radio her mother had saved from the trash. She would play along, repeating the melodies, trying to capture the emotion in every note. At first, it was clumsy and the sounds were often out of place, but she kept going. Every mistake was a lesson, every wrong note a step towards something better. Her mother noticed the way her daughter would sit at the piano long after finishing her chores. She didn't say much, just watched quietly. Some nights, when her daughter was asleep, she would tiptoe to the piano and touch a key gently, imagining the music her daughter would one day create. She didn't have the words to explain it, but she felt that something extraordinary was growing in that little girl. The apartment was small, so when she played, the sound seemed to echo off the walls, filling every corner with a strange kind of warmth. Sometimes the neighbors would knock on the walls, complaining about the noise, but most of the time, she played in secret. She didn't care about applause or recognition. The piano was her friend, her teacher, and her escape all at once. She had a notebook where she scribbled down melodies, little patterns of notes she imagined in her head. The pages were filled with sketches, mistakes, and attempts at songs that never made sense to anyone else but her. She would hum these tunes while helping her mother or walking to the shop. Music was always with her, even when the piano wasn't. Her life outside the apartment was simple and sometimes hard. She wore hand-me-down clothes, ate simple meals, and didn't have toys or games like other children. But she never felt poor when she was at the piano. There, she was rich, free, and full of possibilities. Music gave her a sense of control, a way to express feelings she couldn't put into words. It was her secret world, a place where she was important, where she mattered, and where no one could judge her. She started noticing small things that made her love music even more. The way her fingers felt against the keys, the vibrations running through her hands, the way the sound changed when she pressed harder or softer. She discovered that she could make the piano sound like a whisper or a storm, like a soft rain or a rushing river. These discoveries thrilled her. Each day, she wanted to play longer, to find new sounds, and to see how far her imagination could take her. Even though she had no audience, she began to imagine one. She would picture herself performing for a crowd, feeling their attention and the way the music connected them. She didn't know if it would ever happen, but the thought alone made her practice with more focus. It was as if the piano understood her dreams and encouraged her silently to keep going. Some evenings, when the city outside was noisy and the streets smelled of fried food and smoke, she would close her eyes and play. She could picture faraway places, forests, rivers, and cities she had never visited. The music became her window to the world beyond the small apartment. In those moments, she forgot the tiredness, the chores, and the smallness of her life. She felt limitless. Her mother sometimes asked if she wanted lessons, but they were too expensive. Music schools were for children with money, children with access. She just shook her head and kept practicing in secret. She was learning on her own, and that made every little discovery feel like a victory. Every new melody she learned, every note she mastered, was her own achievement. It belonged to no one else, and that made it special. One night, her mother came home particularly tired. The apartment was quiet, and she found her daughter at the piano, playing softly. She sat down on the couch, listening. For a long time, she didn't say anything, just let the music fill the room. It wasn't perfect, and the piano sometimes groaned under her fingers, but it was beautiful in a way that went beyond technique. It was alive. The mother felt a swell of pride that she could hardly put into words. She didn't know if her daughter would ever play in a big concert hall or become famous. She didn't even know if anyone would ever hear her, but she knew that this music, this dedication, was rare and precious. It was something that no one could take away, something that belonged entirely to her daughter. And so, life went on. The streets remained busy, the city remained noisy, and the apartment remained small. But within it, a young girl and her old piano created something extraordinary every day. It was quiet work, slow and unnoticed, but it was real, and it was hers. Every key she pressed, every melody she imagined, was a step toward a future she could not yet see but could feel in her heart. The music carried her through the hard days, filled the empty spaces of their apartment, and, unknowingly, began to prepare her for a moment when the world outside would finally notice the extraordinary gift she had nurtured in secret. One morning, a small poster appeared on a notice board near the local library. It was bright, with bold letters inviting anyone who could play the piano to an open session at the city's cultural center. It sounded simple enough, but the words caught her attention immediately. Her heart beat faster as she read it again. Could she, a girl from a small apartment who had never had a lesson, actually go and play where other musicians gathered? She thought about it all day, imagining what it would be like to walk into a big hall with real pianos, where people who knew music would listen. She also felt fear. What if she made mistakes? What if they laughed at her? Her mother noticed the excitement and worry in her eyes and asked softly, "Do you want to go?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her mother gave her a small, encouraging smile. "Then you should try. Don't worry about what anyone thinks. Just play." Those words gave her courage. For the first time, she felt that her music might belong to more than just the walls of their apartment. On the morning of the session, she woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She wore her best outfit, simple and neat, the only dress she had that wasn't patched or faded. She held her mother's hand tightly as they walked through the streets. The city seemed bigger than usual that day, the noise louder, and the people busier, but she focused on each step, trying to calm herself. When they arrived at the cultural center, she felt a mixture of awe and fear. The building was tall and grand, with glass doors that reflected the sunlight. Inside, there were people moving quickly, some carrying instruments, some talking about music with serious faces. She clutched her mother's hand a little tighter, feeling small and out of place. A volunteer at the entrance guided them to the piano hall. The room was larger than anything she had ever seen, with high ceilings and polished wooden floors. There were several pianos lined up, each one shiny and new. Musicians were already playing quietly, testing the keys, adjusting their benches, and reading sheet music. She could hear the soft, careful notes floating through the room. Her stomach twisted with nerves. Everyone looked so professional, so confident. She felt like she might disappear if she turned invisible. Her mother knelt beside her and whispered, "Go on, you belong here too." With a deep breath, she nodded and stepped forward. A bench had been left open at one of the grand pianos. It was shiny, black, and almost too perfect. She sat down slowly, her small fingers hovering above the keys. The piano seemed enormous compared to the one at home, and she felt its weight, its presence, and for a moment, her nerves froze her in place. She closed her eyes and thought of her small apartment, of the quiet mornings spent practicing, of the melodies she had discovered alone. She thought of her mother's gentle smile, the way she had always encouraged her, the faith that had been quietly waiting for this moment. Slowly, she let her hands fall onto the keys and pressed a note. The sound was beautiful and different from her old piano at home. It sang and resonated through the room. Encouraged, she pressed another, then another. Her fingers moved carefully at first, finding the notes, remembering the melodies she had practiced. Then, almost without realizing it, she began to play freely, letting her emotions guide her. The music flowed from her heart, soft at first, then stronger, filled with the passion and longing she had held inside for so long. People started to notice. Some paused in their playing, turning toward her. Musicians with serious faces stopped checking their sheet music, leaning in to listen. The notes filled the hall, moving like a river, wrapping around everyone in the room. Her hands moved as if they knew the music better than she did, creating sounds she had never imagined. She didn't look at the audience, didn't worry about their judgment. All that mattered was the music, the connection, and the freedom it gave her. A few moments later, a small crowd gathered quietly around her. They whispered to each other, surprised by the talent coming from someone so young and untrained. She felt their eyes on her, but instead of fear, she felt a strange kind of energy, as if the music itself was carrying her beyond the room, beyond the doubts, beyond the fear. Her melodies rose and fell, dancing through the hall like sunlight through leaves, sometimes soft and tender, sometimes bold and commanding. The session continued, and people came and went, but she played without pause. Every note, every chord, was a story she had carried with her for years, now unfolding for anyone willing to listen. Even though the other musicians were experienced and polished, there was a raw honesty in her playing that touched everyone. It wasn't just about technique or skill. It was about feeling, about giving a piece of herself through the piano. Her mother watched from a corner, holding her breath and trying not to cry. She had always believed in her daughter, but seeing her in this grand hall, commanding the piano with such emotion, was overwhelming. Other parents in the room noticed too, murmuring quietly, impressed by the young girl who played as though she had lived 100 lives. As she finished one piece, the room stayed silent for a moment. No one moved, no one spoke. Then, slowly, a few hands began to clap. One by one, more people joined in, until the applause filled the room. She looked up, startled, and finally saw the faces around her. They were smiling, nodding, and some had tears in their eyes. She had never expected this. She had only wanted to play, to share the music she loved, not knowing that it could touch others in such a deep way. A man approached her, an older musician with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He asked if she had lessons, and she shook her head, explaining that she had only practiced at home, teaching herself. He nodded slowly, impressed, and encouraged her to keep playing. "You have something rare," he said. "Don't lose it. Keep nurturing it." She left the cultural center that day with her heart full of wonder and excitement. Her mother hugged her tightly, proud and relieved. They walked home slowly, the city feeling different now, alive with possibilities. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that this day had changed something inside her. She had stepped into a world she never thought she could enter, and the world had noticed her music. That night, she sat by her old piano at home, playing softly. The notes were different from the grand piano, quieter, gentler, but the magic was still there. She realized that music wasn't about the size of the room, the polish of the piano, or the skill of the players around her. It was about the heart, the feeling, and the courage to share what she had with the world. And from that moment on, she knew that no matter how humble her beginnings, her music could carry her to places she had only dreamed of, places where people would listen, feel, and remember. After that first day at the cultural center, word began to spread quietly among the musicians who had been there. Some of them had played alongside her, some had only stopped to listen for a few minutes, but all of them felt something different in the way she played. It was not just her technical skill, which was impressive for someone her age and experience, but the emotion she put into each note. Every melody carried a story, a depth, and honesty that many adults with years of training struggled to achieve. They began to talk to each other in hushed voices about the girl who had appeared out of nowhere and captured the room without any formal training. The next few days, she could not stop thinking about her experience. She returned home, sat at her old piano, and replayed every melody she had performed. She felt different somehow, more alive, more certain that music was not just a secret she held for herself anymore. She began to experiment even more, trying to combine the melodies she had been practicing with feelings she could not yet describe. The piano became a map of her heart and mind, a place where she could explore sadness, hope, joy, and longing all at once. Her mother noticed the change immediately. The way she moved her fingers over the keys, the way her eyes shone when she discovered a new tune. It all felt different. She could see the confidence growing in her daughter, a quiet strength that had not been there before. The mother often wondered how someone so young could have such a powerful connection to music, but she never tried to explain it. She only encouraged her, quietly supporting every hour spent at the piano, every note that came from her daughter's imagination. A week later, an envelope arrived at their small apartment. Inside was an invitation to return to the cultural center, this time for a special evening performance. The note was simple, polite but firm. They wanted her to play again. She held the paper in her hands, staring at the words as if they were a dream. Her heart raced, and she felt a mix of excitement and fear. The audience this time would be larger, more experienced, and the expectation heavier. Could she rise to the occasion? Could she play well enough to meet their silent hopes? The days leading up to the performance were filled with preparation, but not in the way most people imagine. She did not have a teacher to tell her what to practice, no schedule to follow, no sheet music to memorize. She simply played every day, letting her fingers move, letting her imagination guide her. She tried new things, experimented with rhythms and melodies, and sometimes stumbled into mistakes that became something beautiful instead. Her practice was alive, not mechanical, and every day she felt more connected to the music, more confident that it could express what she wanted it to say. The evening of the performance arrived, and the city streets felt electric with energy. People hurried past each other, the smell of food and smoke and rain mixing in the air. Her mother held her hand as they walked toward the cultural center. She felt the weight of the piano bench in her small fingers, the anticipation pressing against her chest. Inside the hall, the lights were warm, the ceiling high and inviting, and the pianos gleamed in the soft glow. Musicians moved gracefully, tuning instruments, adjusting benches, whispering quietly among themselves. There were parents, critics, and music lovers filling the seats, waiting for the performances to begin. When it was her turn, she stepped onto the stage, small and nervous, but determined. She looked at the grand piano in front of her, its black surface shining, and took a deep breath. She remembered the first time she had sat at a piano outside her apartment, the way the notes had sounded, the way the music had connected her to the people around her. Slowly, she sat down, her fingers hovering above the keys, and closed her eyes. The hall went quiet, waiting for her first note. She pressed down softly, and the sound filled the room like a gentle wave. She began to play, her fingers moving with confidence now, guided by years of silent practice and quiet dedication. The music was tender at first, almost hesitant, but it soon grew bolder, stronger, carrying emotions she had never spoken aloud. The audience leaned forward, listening, drawn into the story she was telling with each note. Some of the older musicians exchanged glances, surprised at the depth of feeling coming from someone so young and untrained. She didn't think about the audience or their reactions. She didn't think about the stage or the size of the room. All that existed was the music, flowing from her heart through her fingers and into the air. Her melodies rose and fell, soft and tender, then powerful and commanding, painting pictures in the minds of everyone listening. The room was alive with sound, the kind of music that made people forget the world outside and pay attention only to the moment, to the feelings, to the story being told. After a few pieces, a hush fell over the audience. She had transitioned from quiet, reflective melodies to a piece that demanded attention, a piece full of energy and passion. Her hands moved faster now, creating patterns of notes that seemed impossible for someone so young. The audience watched in awe, some with tears in their eyes, some with mouths slightly open, unable to believe what they were hearing. It was not just skill, it was the truth in her music, the honesty that could not be taught or learned in a classroom. It came from inside her, from a lifetime of silent practice, of imagination, and of emotion. When she finally finished, the hall stayed still for a moment. The silence was heavy, almost as if the room itself did not want to interrupt what had just happened. Then, slowly, a few hands began to clap. One by one, more people joined in, until the applause filled the room, warm and sincere. She opened her eyes, startled, and saw faces smiling, nodding, some with tears, some shaking their heads in disbelief. She had done it. She had shared her music, and the world had listened. Among the crowd were musicians who had performed in international halls, critics who had written for music journals, and teachers who had trained students for years. They approached her after the performance, praising her skill, asking questions about her practice, her inspiration, her future plans. She spoke quietly, explaining that she had learned on her own, that she had no lessons, only hours of practice at home and a love for music. They nodded, impressed, and encouraged her to keep playing, to nurture the rare gift she had discovered in herself. Her mother hugged her tightly after the performance, tears streaming down her face. She whispered words of pride and love, telling her daughter how extraordinary she was. The girl realized that while applause and recognition were wonderful, the greatest reward was the feeling of connection through music, the way she could touch the hearts of others with something that came from within herself. She understood that this was only the beginning, that her journey was far from over. But for the first time, she felt that she belonged in the world she had imagined for so long. The days that followed were filled with new opportunities and experiences. She began receiving invitations to play at other events, to meet teachers who wanted to guide her, and to perform for audiences who had heard of her talent. Despite the sudden attention, she remained grounded, remembering the quiet mornings in her small apartment, the long hours spent teaching herself, and the unwavering support of her mother. She knew that her music was hers first, a gift she had nurtured in secret, and it was this truth that made every performance authentic and unforgettable. Her confidence grew, but so did her desire to learn more. She experimented with new styles, tried different techniques, and continued to pour her heart into every piece she played. She discovered that the piano could express things words never could, and she cherished every moment spent at the keys. The music became not only a part of her life, but a part of her identity, a way to understand herself and the world around her. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of passion, dedication, imagination, and courage that made her music extraordinary. She remembered her mother's words, her encouragement, and the belief that had carried her through every challenge. And in those quiet moments at the piano, she felt a sense of fulfillment, a knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be, sharing her music, telling her story, and touching lives in ways she had never imagined possible. After her performance at the cultural center, her life began to change in ways she could never have imagined. Invitations arrived from other music events, small at first, then gradually larger, each one giving her the chance to share her music with more people. Musicians who had been in the audience during her first performance approached her with kindness and respect, offering guidance, advice, and mentorship. It was overwhelming, but also thrilling. For the first time, she realized that her music could connect her to the world outside her small apartment. She met teachers who had trained students for decades, artists who had performed in grand concert halls around the world, and critics who had written about some of the greatest musicians of the time. They were curious about her story, amazed that someone so young could create music with such feeling and precision. Without formal training, each conversation reinforced her confidence and pushed her to practice harder, to explore the piano even further, and to embrace every opportunity that came her way. Her mother watched all of this with a mixture of pride and concern. She had always known her daughter was talented, but seeing the recognition come so quickly was both exciting and intimidating. The mother worried about pressure, about expectations, and about the challenges her daughter might face in the larger world. But she also knew that she could not hold her back. She remained by her side, supporting her quietly, reminding her to stay grounded, to play with honesty, and to enjoy the music above all else. One afternoon, a well-known pianist came to her apartment. He had heard about the young girl who played with extraordinary feeling, and wanted to see her in her own environment. He watched as she approached the piano, small and focused, her fingers poised above the keys. She began to play, and he listened quietly, letting the music fill the room. When she finished, he smiled warmly. "You have something very rare," he said. "Not many people can make music feel alive the way you do. I would like to help you, if you will let me." She was both nervous and excited. This was an opportunity she had only dreamed of, a chance to learn from someone who could teach her new techniques, new ways to express herself, and new pieces that would challenge her skills. She agreed eagerly, and from that day on, her practice took on a new dimension. She learned to combine what she had taught herself with the guidance of a mentor who could refine her talent, opening doors to possibilities she had never imagined. As she continued to perform, she met more artists, each offering their own insights, encouragement, and support. They introduced her to music she had never heard before, styles she had not yet explored, and techniques that expanded her understanding of the piano. She absorbed it all, not as a student who needed to follow rules, but as a musician who wanted to discover, to explore, and to grow. Every lesson, every suggestion, became another tool she could use to express herself, another step in her journey. Her performances began to draw larger audiences. People came not just to hear music, but to experience the emotion she put into every note. Critics wrote about her, describing her as a natural talent with a rare gift, someone who could move audiences without the need for fancy techniques or elaborate performances. She played in small halls at first, then gradually larger venues, always keeping the music honest and personal. The applause and recognition were wonderful, but what mattered most was the connection she felt with her audience. the way her music could speak to people in ways words could not. Despite the growing attention, she remained grounded. She returned to her small apartment every night, sat at her old piano, and played quietly, remembering where she had started. She practiced for herself, not for anyone else, and this authenticity was what made her music so powerful. She knew that her talent had been nurtured in secret, through hours of practice in a quiet apartment. Guided by her imagination and her love for music, that foundation remained her strength, keeping her focused and true to herself. She also began to help other young musicians she met along the way, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to explore music in their own way. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It needed to be paired with dedication, curiosity, and the courage to be different. She became a source of inspiration for others, showing that even someone from humble beginnings could achieve extraordinary things if they believed in themselves and nurtured their gifts. Her mother remained her anchor throughout this journey. She attended every performance she could, sat quietly in the back, and clapped with pride at every note her daughter played. She reminded her daughter to stay humble, to remember the small apartment where it all began, and to keep music as a source of joy rather than just accomplishment. Their bond grew stronger, a quiet partnership built on love, respect, and shared dreams. The recognition from renowned artists opened doors she had never thought possible. She was invited to workshops, collaborations, and even recordings. Each opportunity was a step forward, a chance to explore her talent in new ways, and a confirmation that the world had noticed her extraordinary gift. She learned to navigate these experiences with grace, keeping her focus on the music and the feelings it could convey, rather than the fame or attention it brought. Through it all, she never forgot her roots. She remembered the long nights practicing alone, the simple apartment filled with the soft hum of her old piano, and the unwavering support of her mother. These memories were a source of strength, reminding her that talent alone was not enough. It was love, dedication, and perseverance that truly shaped her journey. Every performance, every note, every applause carried with it the story of where she had come from, and that story gave her music a depth and authenticity that touched everyone who listened. As her skills and confidence grew, she began to see a future filled with possibilities. She imagined performing in grand concert halls, collaborating with artists she had admired from afar, and sharing her music with people around the world. Yet, even with these dreams, she remained humble, focused, and deeply connected to the piano, which had been her companion and teacher from the very beginning. The journey was far from over, but each step brought new experiences, new lessons, and a deeper understanding of herself and her music. Her story became an inspiration to everyone who knew her, a reminder that talent can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that dedication, passion, and love for what you do can create something extraordinary. She had taken the first steps out of a small apartment into a larger world, and the path ahead was wide open. Every note she played, every melody she created, carried the promise of a future full of music, connection, and the power to touch hearts in ways that words could never reach. As time went on, her music reached more and more people. Invitations came from concerts, music festivals, and charity events. Each performance was different, each audience unique, but the feeling remained the same, a connection through the piano that went beyond words. She played with honesty and emotion, not for recognition, but because music had become a part of her life, a way to express feelings that she could not put into words. She began performing in larger venues, halls filled with people who had traveled from different cities just to hear her play. The atmosphere was electric, yet she remained calm, focused on the piano and the stories she wanted to tell through her music. Her fingers moved effortlessly, translating thoughts and emotions into melodies that resonated with every listener. People often said that her performances felt alive, that they could feel the joy, sadness, hope, and love she poured into each piece. Even with the growing fame, she stayed grounded. She remembered the quiet mornings in her small apartment, practicing on an old, imperfect piano. Guided only by her imagination and dedication, she returned home regularly, sitting at her old piano, letting the familiar keys remind her where it all began. These moments kept her humble and focused, reminding her that music was not about applause or attention, but about sharing a piece of herself with the world. Her mother continued to be her anchor. She attended every possible performance, offering silent support and encouragement. Their bond grew stronger, each understanding the other in a way that words could not capture. The mother never intervened or pushed, simply providing love, wisdom, and a sense of stability. This quiet support allowed her to explore her talent fully and grow without fear or doubt. Mentors and renowned artists continued to guide her, introducing her to new music, techniques, and opportunities. She learned quickly, absorbing every lesson, but always putting her own feelings and experiences into the music. She was not a copy of anyone else. She was her own artist, with a unique voice and perspective. Each performance reflected her journey, her struggles, her dreams, and her triumphs. It was music that spoke from the heart, touching people in ways that were personal and profound. She also began to inspire other young musicians. Children and teenagers from different neighborhoods would come to see her play, eager to learn, eager to find the courage to follow their own passions. She shared her story openly, explaining that talent alone was not enough, but dedication, practice, and belief in oneself could create something extraordinary. She encouraged them to play, to explore, and to express themselves honestly through music. Many young artists found hope and motivation in her journey, seeing that it was possible to rise from humble beginnings to stages they had only dreamed of. Despite the growing attention, she never let it change who she was. She kept her routines, continued to practice diligently, and remained connected to the music that had first captivated her. Fame did not make her forget the quiet joy of discovering a new melody on her own, or the thrill of hearing a note come to life for the first time. She knew that music was her companion, teacher, and friend, and she treated it with respect and love. Opportunities kept expanding. She was invited to perform in prestigious events, collaborate with other talented musicians, and even record her own compositions. Each new experience challenged her, but also excited her. She discovered that every performance was a chance to grow, to experiment, and to communicate something meaningful. The world was opening up, but she remained focused on the music itself, not the fame it brought. People began to recognize her not just for skill, but for the emotion and honesty in her performances. Audiences were moved to tears, to laughter, to reflection. Critics praised her ability to make music feel alive, to create a story with every note, to connect deeply with listeners. She had become a symbol of hope, talent, and perseverance, showing that greatness could emerge from anyone, no matter their background or circumstances. She also used her growing platform to help others. She supported music programs for children in underprivileged areas, donated instruments, and sometimes gave lessons herself. She wanted to ensure that talent and passion could be nurtured, even in places where opportunities were scarce. She remembered her own beginnings, the small apartment, the old piano, the quiet encouragement from her mother. She wanted other children to have the same chance to discover their gifts and to grow without fear. Through all this, she never lost sight of why she played. Music was not a means to an end. It was a way of living, a way to express feelings, to connect with people, and to understand herself. She continued to practice daily, exploring new melodies, experimenting with techniques, and pushing the boundaries of her creativity. Every piece she played was a reflection of her journey, a story of dedication, courage, and love for her art. As she performed in larger halls and for more diverse audiences, she realized the power of music to bridge differences. People from all walks of life, different cultures, and ages were touched by the same melodies. The piano became a language, a shared experience that transcended words and backgrounds. She saw that her music could inspire empathy, understanding, and hope, and this realization filled her with purpose. Her life had transformed dramatically, but she remained humble and focused. She continued to live simply, cherishing her family, her routines, and the quiet moments spent at her piano. Fame and recognition came and went, but the music stayed constant. It was a companion, a teacher, a friend, and a source of endless exploration. Every note was an opportunity to tell a story, to connect with someone else, and to express a truth that could not be spoken. In the end, she had become more than a talented musician. She had become a symbol of perseverance, dedication, and authenticity. She showed that extraordinary talent could come from the most unexpected places, that love and support could nurture greatness, and that following one's passion with sincerity could touch lives in ways beyond imagination. Her story was not just about music, but about courage, dreams, and the power of believing in oneself. She continued to perform, to inspire, and to grow, always remembering the small apartment, the old piano, and the mother who had believed in her. Every melody she played carried a piece of her journey, a testament to the power of passion, perseverance, and love. She knew that her story was far from over, that each day brought new challenges and new opportunities, but she faced them with confidence. grounded in her roots and guided by the music that had always been a part of her heart.